Black History Month is often framed as remembrance, a retrospective, a reflection on what was. But history isn't something we visit once a year. History is something we live inside of, including online. And one of the ways history continues to echo through digital culture is through something we call digital blackface. Lauren Michelle Jackson describes digital blackface as, quote, a modern form of minstrel performance made possible in cyberspace, end quote. And that language matters. Blackface minstrelsy was not harmless entertainment. It was a racial project, a theatrical tradition rooted in caricature, exaggeration, and spectacle, where Blackness was performed, distorted, and commodified for the amusement of others. Black humanity reduced to gesture, to expression, to emotional performance. Make note, and this is important, this tradition didn't disappear. It merely evolved. Today, digital blackface shows up in ways many people barely notice. It shows up in GIFs, memes, reaction images, in dramatic eye rolls, in exaggerated shock, in a neck roll, an unbothered stare, in an explosive reaction. This is not a conversation banning humor, but digital harm seldom looks villainous, and that is what makes it so insidious. It looks like habit. It looks like repetition. It looks like cultural patterns we've grown so accustomed to seeing that they now feel invisible. For many of us working toward liberation, it can feel like white supremacy, or as Sonia Renee Taylor so precisely names it, white supremacist delusion permeates everything, even the spaces we once imagined as neutral, digital spaces included. We now spend enormous portions of our lives online, hours each day scrolling, reacting, communicating, expressing. A third of our waking lives in these environments, and none of these interactions is neutral. Every share, every post, every reaction either reinforces culture or reshapes it. Digital blackface operates through something subtle but powerful: emotional outsourcing. When non-Black users repeatedly rely on images of Black people to perform heightened emotion, sass, anger, shock, chaos, exaggerated expressiveness, Black bodies become emotional shorthand. Black faces become reaction buttons. Black humanity becomes a tool for performance, all without engaging the context and lived experience of being Black in the world those images come from. Black bodies become a vessel for expression without the consequences of inhabiting that body. And this is where history quietly re-enters the room, because Blackface minstrelsy also relied on exaggeration, on spectacle, on reducing Blackness to emotional display. Different medium, similar pattern, same harm. Conversations like this often trigger resistance, even within the Black community. It's just a GIF. It's not that deep. I didn't mean anything by it. And intent does matter, but it does not erase impact. Digital culture shapes perception. Perception shapes bias. Bias shapes lived reality. We are never just posting. We are participating in meaning making. So, what does harm reduction look like in digital life? It begins with interruption, interrupting autopilot, that tiny pause before hitting send. Why this image? Why this face? Why this expression? Because most harm online is not driven by cruelty. It's driven by unconscious bias and repetition. Then comes pattern recognition. Not the isolated post, the pattern. Do black faces in your digital world primarily appear as anger, attitude, shock, comedy, exaggerated emotion, and rarely as softness, nuance, ordinary humanity, complexity? Patterns reveal what habits conceal. Harm reduction also means expanding how we express emotion. Not every feeling requires a reaction image. Words are powerful. Emojis are sufficient. Silence can be enough. When we diversify expression, we reduce the unconscious use of racialized bodies as emotional proxies. It also requires examining humor itself. If something is funny because it leans on exaggeration, stereotype, unhinged energy, caricatured emotion, we have to ask, what assumptions are being reinforced? Who's being flattened into a trope? Stereotypes rarely survive through overt declarations. They survive through repetition framed as entertainment. At its core, this is about humanity. Black people are not emotional props, cultural texture, reaction devices. We are whole human beings whose images carry history, social meaning, and lived consequence, even in digital form, especially in digital form, because technology amplifies what culture normalizes. Another small but meaningful shift: follow creators instead of simply circulating their faces. Context restores dignity, and engagement restores humanity. Recognition interrupts commodification. And perhaps most importantly, when harm is named, listen without defensiveness, without immediate justification. Growth rarely begins with agreement. It begins with willingness to sit within your own discomfort long enough for awareness to form. None of this is about perfection. Perfection is not the goal. Consciousness is. Awareness is. Intentional participation is. Liberation is not only structural, it's behavioral, cultural, iterative, and cumulative. We spend hours each day inside our digital worlds, shaping them as they shape us. And within those spaces, every action is a choice, not between good and evil, but between unconscious repetition and conscious intentional engagement, between perpetuating harm and reducing it, even and especially online.